It's these 2 crore genes
that
actually control our 30,000 genes.
Absolutely.
So you are more of a microorganism than you are a human being. And I think the future of science will be to integrate and understand genetics with microbiomics.
Right. I was tired of listening that genes are our destiny, and this is such a 2000-year statement. Today we know that epigenetics and metagenomics play a major role.
See, I've been one of the people who've got my gut microbe tested.
Right.
Today, if you look at military and some of the most top international classified groups, some of them carry their own toilets.
Right.
Because they just feel that your DNA data is so important and data privacy is everything, correct?
Right.
Today. So imagine this, that if somebody were to be carrying their own toilets where they travel in the VVIP zone, it would be because the DNA can be used to understand better.
Right.
Disorders, insomnias, sleep disorders, including, I feel, longevity.
Right.
If a person wants to live longer, he'll have to have the right gut, changing at the right momentum.
Hi, I'm Darshit Patel, and today I have Dr. Vishal with me. We are going to talk about gut microbiome. So doctor, gut microbiome has been the buzzword over the past few years, and we all know that it is an ecosystem that we live in. It's an ecosystem that lives within us, and they're interacting with our body continuously. So what do you think is the role of gut microbiome in the non-communicable diseases and disease like cancer, which only occur at a certain age?
Thank you, Darshit, first of all, for inviting me. And this has been a hot burning topic. Let me start by saying that the next 1 decade is for synthetic biology. Now, when you look at synthetic biology and when you're looking at the future of science, I think the most interesting thing that happens in science today is everybody is talking about genetics. Everybody is talking about genomics, science of genetics, the part of not the hereditary genetics, but the part of somatic genetics, or the part that our genes are changing as we live our lives today, with the food we eat, the air we breathe, with the water we drink, with the people we interact, the genes are changing. So the question was, does the genes have the secret code to our destiny? I think that's the whole thing that people are kind of pushing, discussing, researching. Look at the world's top 10 labs and they're just searching on this.
Right.
So I think we are at a very interesting juncture. And for me today, as a cancer specialist, as an oncologist, I got introduced into the world of science, genomics, about 2 decades back. And I think that's the reason I was able to catch up with a lot of the new advances. And for me, the biggest learning of what stimulated me into understanding this area and its evolution was, when we take a guess, let's say I'm asking somebody to think over here, saying, tell me, how many genes do we have in our body, in the human body? Now, if I were to ask someone here, saying, how many genes do we have in our human body? And what would your answer be? I'm not sure of how many of you all will guess in hundreds, thousands, but roughly around 30,000 genes is what makes up our human body, which are embedded into our DNA. Right. Now these 30,000 genes, interestingly, are having certain influences, and I think that's what happened when Craig Venter started the Human Genome Project, correct? Yeah. He gave the world a new door to show that the secret code of destiny is somewhere hidden inside these genes. Right. Now the question was, what do these genes do? And I had, during this period that I was looking into this data, I was very intrigued by the understanding of, let's say, how many genes are there in 1 rice grain?
Right.
Think of this, how many genes are there in 1 rice grain? There are 55,000 genes. So does that mean that we are more, but I thought we are like at the top of the chain of this universe, top of the food chain, the most evolved beings. And how can a rice grain, which is this tiny one, have more genes than a human body, the most intelligent ones? And I keep, on a lighter note, joking to my students and say, aap log NEET pass karke aaye ho, intelligent log ho, first rank leke aaye biology mein. But there are more genes in a rice grain.
Right.
So what's special about these genes of ours if a rice grain is smarter than you?
Right.
So I jokingly ask these medical students, if you all are, you all are at the top of the intelligent chains, coming with cracking the best exams, and how does it make sense that you have lesser genes than a rice grain?
Absolutely.
Correct? And that's when I open the topic, when I teach them about gut microbiome and say that there are 2 crore genes sitting inside our gut, which actually control our 30,000 genes. And I think this was the discovery that Craig Venter did and many others did when they realized that after the Human Genome Project, when they took about a decade. So whenever I make this lighter note of discussions with our medical students and open up the gut microbiome, it's these 2 crore genes that actually control our 30,000 genes. So you are more of a microorganism than you are a human being.
Exactly.
And that's the part that Craig Venter's team got to know when they actually found that they completely analyzed all the 30,000 genes. One of the first things that they found was they had more questions than answers.
Yes.
They found that it is not the genetics that decide everything. So the genetics are like the switchboard with many switches on top of it.
Right.
And what turns them on or turns them off is the epigenetics of it.
Absolutely.
And this is where they started studying more and more of how the epigenetic influences. And I remember the story goes that they went back to the NIH and said, we need a few more $1 million of funding because we now need to study epigenetics, because it's not about the switchboard, it's about who turns them on and turns them off.
Absolutely.
And in them, they found that the most powerful source was the microbiome.
Yes.
The most influencing factor. So which means that the gut had control over my life. I had control. Today, if I'm sitting before you and we both are discussing, our gut-brain axis is being decided by what we ate in the morning, whom we met, and how is the gut happy or not. So that's where the science is today, and I think the future of science will be to integrate and understand genetics with microbiomics.
Right.
So I'm glad that your entire team is putting all these efforts to bring the science of this to a new light at a time when India has to be at the cutting edge of the entire, what I would say, deep tech, biotech, and in the area of genetics and genomics,
No, absolutely, that makes sense. I mean, I was tired of listening that genes are our destiny, and this is such a 2,000-year statement. Today we know that epigenetics and metagenomics play a major role. And over time, I think we have not just found out about the gut microbiome, but other places in our body where the microbiome exists, even our mouth, even our nasal cavity, ears, even brain, blood, everywhere. So I think it will be very interesting to use some of the latest technologies coming up in the microbiome analysis itself and extrapolate what's happening on a health level, make it a more diagnostic level rather than just understanding. And a lot of data does exist around correlation. You talk about a disease, type 2 diabetes, we know that gut microbiome is involved, Akkermansia is there, who is controlling the glucose response. There's a pancreatic system involved, just like you mentioned, gut brain. I've read a lot about gut liver, gut heart, gut kidney, all these other axes that exist. And so I'd like to ask one more question here. Since we work on the back-end technology about which technology to use to study this microbiome. I mean, there was a certain technology called 16S which has been exploited over time. And I mean, when we talk about microbiome, I personally don't think 16S is the best way, because 16S is a set of genes for bacteria. So we are doing a bacteriome analysis, but then there's fungal communities, there's viral communities, there are archaeal communities also in microbiome. So do you think it makes sense to go beyond 16S and start looking at new technologies which can actually tell you a lot more about the fungus, the virus, what genes they have and what metabolites they might be producing?
Absolutely. This is like a fossil hunt. I think you have to go out and explore the entire flora and fauna of the gut. If I had to say that, it's like going snorkeling there.
Right.
And you're going to look at all colors, all patterns, you're going to look at everything, and there are still things unknown that we feel in this entire area. Today, as you said, today there are proof to show that a normal delivery child has better immune system than a child born through a cesarean section, because the first inoculation and vaccination of your microbiome to the child into this universe comes from the mother's vagina.
Definitely.
And thereafter, the overall evolution of the gut microbe has a very, very powerful dynamic play from your mind to the food we eat to the environment we live in and everything. I think so. Completely, I think the emphasis, and I'm encouraging people in every field of non-communicable diseases today to say that we have to be in India because of the population that we are having right now. If we are able to get to more clearer answers on some of the most basic questions that the world is currently grappling with in non-communicable diseases, I think that is the greatest service we would have done to advancement of science in India.
No, absolutely. I completely agree to that. Especially now, the population is kind of aging. Our population pyramid is kind of straightening out. So we are expecting that over the next 2 decades, we'll have a lot of non-communicable diseases, and healthcare burden is going to increase with your diabetes, your cardiovasculars, your cancers, and your Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, dementia. So it is now more necessary than ever to start looking at this holistic body environment which is contributing to these diseases. And I really believe, I mean, it's not just hope anymore. I really believe that gut microbiome is going to help us discover a lot of biomarkers around these around these different diseases. Also, when the data like genomics has helped a lot of personalized treatments, I think with microbiome analysis, with epigenetic analysis, we are only going to get a better level of personalization and precision. So do you share the same thought along that?
See, I've been one of the people who've got my gut microbe tested.
Right.
Today, if you look at military and some of the most top international classified groups, some of them carry their own toilets.
Right.
Because they just feel that your DNA data is so important and data privacy is everything, correct?
Right.
Today. So imagine this, that if somebody were to be carrying their own toilets where they travel in the VVIP zone, it would be because the DNA can be used to understand better.
Right.
You have given me a Janam Kundli of my particular gut microbiome, correct? I have got a complete Janam Patri now, which says what are the microbes that are living, are they happy or not?
Yeah.
In them, what are the problematic ones?
Right.
And the most interesting thing that I found was the age-old adage that said that the only good bug is a dead bug. Right. I think that today is completely out. That philosophy is totally changed. We know that it's only the good bugs that are there that we are requiring, and probiotics is the classic example. Explosion of probiotics has been the classic example to talk about how everybody wants to keep the gut happy now.
Right.
Now it's moved from the mindfulness to the gutfulness, where they're looking at if the gut is happy, the mindfulness is going to happen. So whether you're talking about anxiety, depression, Alzheimer's, mind health is talking about gut. So I think we are at a very interesting time, and when I looked at some of the reports that you all have generated in terms of the serotonin part, which is purely released in the gut, or other hormones like dopamine and others, I think today's world, when we are looking at anxiety, depression, sleep disorders, NCDs, what I think is pertinent and relevant is, one is, yes, you have the technology to say that I want to study the entire gut microbe, which you all give us. So you tell us what are the bacteria, what are the archives, what are the viruses, fungus, you give us a whole list of them. Then the other part comes as, what do I do with this? What information? And I'm glad that you all are working towards customizing diets with this. I think that's a very crucial part. I keep telling people, you are what you eat. Today, your gut microbiome is able to tell you so much about yourself just based on what is there in the microbes to telling you what foods are missing in your diet. So traditionally, when I sit with my cancer patients, I have a box. I call this the treatment planning box, which is not radiotherapy, surgery and chemotherapy, but that box has what is the tumor characteristics. Now, even in the worst cancers, I'm talking about stage 4C cancers, 10% of the cells may be metastatic, correct? 90% are still good. Nobody talks about the good one. Everybody is busy talking about the 10% killing, eliminating, but I'm saying let's talk about 90. So we have 10% which is the tumor ka kundli. That means today we are looking at the tumor microbiome, we are looking at the tumor's microenvironment, its histopathological features, and then looking at genetics, which is tumor related Janam Patri. What about the other Janam Patri? About the person's immune system. And I think that's where I mandate and say that the top priority is the gut microbiome, which will tell you about your immune system, which will tell you what you should eat, what is your current level of overall immune balance, correlated with your blood immune profile.
Absolutely.
and cytokine levels, which will also predict and complement with the basic something like which a complete blood count can tell you is a complete neutrophil to lymphocyte ratio or a platelet to lymphocyte ratio, which you get in 50 rupees or less.
Right.
It can give you such a valuable thing about your immune system. Two newer aspects of epigenetics and other things, but I think the most important parts of this box is the tumor genomics, the microbiomics and the blood immune profile. If these four are to be fitted in a box, we'll get a complete picture of the patient.
Absolutely.
And this formula needs to be adopted for every disease possible in various permutations and combinations. Now, where there's no tumor, we need to have blood markers, circulating or cell-free DNAs. We don't, maybe DNA methylations. There are more science to this, I think. But for a common man, what's more important to understand is, I think it's time for us to relook into the gut. And genetics may not be the secret code to the full answer. It's the gut genetics specifically that could be the secret code that is influencing your genes.
Right. And I mean, systemic inflammation is there at the core of almost all non-communicable disease, including cancer. And there's a high correlation of gut microbiome and the systemic inflammation. So if we can really control that through personalized treatments on the gut microbiome, that should really help us. And
personally, Darshit, when I was looking at the report, some of the reports that you have shared with me of many of these cancer patients, and I was looking at various aspects of diet that they did not have.
Right.
Now, I was able to give them a customized plan with my dietitian to say, look, this is the level of, and this was correlated with several aspects which you all gave us on. This patient has a very low serotonin.
Right.
And his diet is deficient in these products. It could be apples, bananas, sprouts.
Right.
I mean, I think the detailing with which you all were able to give it gives a lot of customized solution for him to say what is missing in your diet right now.
Absolutely.
And that has such a strong influence on the gut microbiome as a pre and a probiotic.
Right.
To come and allow these microbes to settle there, because these microbes also need some food and nutrition for them to grow, and this is the kind of foods that will allow them to flourish in that area.
No, absolutely, and that is the goal. See, what we have understood, we have traditionally understood that, okay, some food items are good for us and some are bad. People say spinach is very healthy for me. But what if you don't have the right microbes to digest it? People have been taking whey like anything in the in the gym industry, right? And despite they don't have the right microbes to digest that, maybe pea protein is more suitable to them, maybe whole protein is more suitable to them. And I think this personalization is what we were initially trying to achieve as well. And I think you mentioned a very important point. Most people don't know which food item has what, be it prebiotic or probiotic. So that's why
it's not customized to your gut.
And especially with Indians, we have traditionally believed our diet is very healthy, but it's so carb heavy.
And a point that you raised, that when for example, you don't have the microbes to digest whey proteins, what happens is you start developing stomach related issues, gut issues, you get irritable bowel syndromes, there are new microangiopathies that are there are multiple digestive disorders that are coming today, which is because of using all these chemical foods, artificial foods. So I think it's a very important need to understand and also serially follow up your microbes, because they change over time.
Yes, it's not like genomics, it will change over a month. If you have traveled somewhere, it's going to change. If you're eating something else today, it's going to change. And it's absolutely
And I think
necessary.
that way, at least with your annual check, I think you should have the annual gut check to see if the gut is happy or not.
Right. No, absolutely. I think, and that should be more accessible to people, is why we are constantly working on, how to make it more affordable, accessible to everyone. Because if one can really control their diet, they can really make sure that their 80s don't turn out to be as bad as they are being portrayed today with everyone, right? So
I think what is the most fascinating thing for me that has happened in the gut area, which I was recently talking to some of the well-learned group at a talk, and I realized that they were not able to fathom the fact was fecal microbial transplant. You take the normal stool from a healthy individual, analyzing them, and then if you're able to purify it and put it into a capsule and give it as a supplement to a person who doesn't have a good gut, that itself is considered curative in many diseases today.
Absolutely.
And I think the future is going to be holding more for customized therapies, and India is still lagging behind in FMTs, in fecal microbial
Absolutely.
transplants. And I think that's the need of the hour today, to address how understanding the gut microbiome and giving it as a therapeutic solution,
Right.
which is not present today in genetics. In genetics, you cannot, after understanding the genes, if somebody asks me what do I do to correct them, I don't have genetic surgery.
Absolutely.
I someday feel future I'll become a genetic surgeon. Maybe I'll only be working on surgeries of proteins and other things. But today, at least gut microbiome has the plan for understanding the microbes, giving the food products, and in people where there is absolutely no solution, through food you give a direct dose of a good microbe solution. And I think US FDA for the first time in the history has actually approved fecal microbial transplants.
Yeah.
So I believe the coming years is going to be a magic bullet for patients with various GI disorders, insomnias, sleep disorders, including, I feel, longevity.
Right.
If a person wants to live longer, he'll have to have the right gut, changing at the right momentum.
No, definitely. And I think the gut microbiome is going to open up a lot of these therapeutical avenues as well. Of course, there's the diet, of course, there's the probiotics, but what you mentioned about fecal microbiota transplant is something I also have complete faith in, because that needs to be revived. You know, because now we have more understanding of gut from 100 years back when it was first tried. So now we can make FMT even more precise for the patient, and even in terms of donor selection. So I think fecal microbiota transplant is definitely going to pave the way forward. And I think, like you mentioned, there's gene therapies for genomics, which is a lot of stakes to play with. FMT is not that not so much stakes to play with. There's already evidence existing. We have seen that efficacy of FMT is still better than antibiotics in most of the gut related issues. So I think to apply that in non-communicable diseases would be a game
very
changer.
useful thing. And I feel, at least for the future now, we will be seeing a lot amount of analysis and a lot amount of innovations happening in the area of microbiomics, customizable, deliverable to that area, and also editable. So I think that will give us more amount of power to actually use the gut microbiome against various wars of non-communicable diseases.
Absolutely.
I think hopefully we will be hoping that groups like yours will come forward to create specific disease-specific banks.
Right.
And bioinformatics is going to play a pivotal role here to understand the balance of how to get the right microbiomes. Can we in the future be editing these microbes? Can we in the future give them new properties which they did not have? And these are things that are going to be easier done because of the limited number of genes that we'll have to play with them.
Absolutely. And I completely agree, like why microbiomics has developed so much is also because of the computational biology and bioinformatics at the back end. Because if they couldn't standardize the data, we couldn't have used it today. It's absolutely necessary that that field develops in India as much as, you know, the therapeutic side or the other biological side as well. It's an important aspect of biology nowadays.
And I think here I'm wanting to emphasize there will be a pivotal role for academia and industry,
To work
private public partnership to important, because you cannot lose the science of this.
Yes.
I think the science of it is evolving at a hour to hour, day to day base, like the gut.
Right.
So I think we will need to keep our foot on the ground, keep our entire focus very, very precise to achieve this goal of one side getting disease specific data, contouring it, understanding it, deciphering from it.
Right.
And on the other side, actually looking at how we can intervene and give patient benefits through these efforts.
No, absolutely. I believe that's very necessary. Having been on the industry side of science, I have found it very helpful to have advisors with me backing the science continuously, because after all, it's health. Ethics comes first before anything. So I think these professors are really going to help us improve the science. In fact, bringing a lot of knowledge from international scientists as well who have worked around this field could really help the Indian ecosystem to evolve much better than what we have. And I mean, the Indian biotech is picking up. Obviously, we don't hear about it as much as the tech, AI and fintech in India yet, but I believe the next 5 to 10 years definitely belongs to Indian biotech. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Vishal, for sharing your thoughts about gut microbiome and specifically in the area of non-communicable disease. I mean, a lot of people are going to take away a lot of important points from here, and your ability to simplify things is really going to help them, ask themselves certain questions and understand the science better. So feel free to reach out to us anytime you have any question about microbiome or non-communicable diseases. I'm sure Dr. Vishal is a great person to answer that. I wouldn't have found anyone better than you today to answer most of these questions.
Thank you.
And I believe it's going to be a good way forward.
Thank you.
Working together. Yeah.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Namaste.
Namaste.